Hello, welcome to Autocar and welcome to the new Ferrari 12Cilindri 12-cylinder, because Ferrari has named its cars after aspects of its engines before, with Testarossa for example, and it has done so again with this new V12 front mid-engined car which replaces the 812. Now I'll tell you a few technical details in a moment, but I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about the design, because most notable part of it perhaps is this new front end, which is reminiscent of the 365 Daytona with this panel across the front. What Ferrari says it likes about it is it kind of takes away any sort of facial expression. So there's no aggressiveness, no happiness, no sadness. It reminds them of the kind of 60s and 70s time when cars were quite often sci-fi inspired, and Ferrari thinks that it was the finest time in the world for car design, particularly of Grand Tourers. And I'm not going to argue. It's got very taut surfacing, it's very clean. So clean, in fact, that the aero at the back is active, and it is one flap here, one flap on the other side. You'll see that as the video progresses. You'll see them flip up at certain speeds, certain braking, certain lateral accelerations. The fact that they're one either side rather than across the middle means that it doesn't impinge on boot space at all, and it still allows the boot to come down in a nice, clean shape. There's quite a decent boot under here, in fact. There's only 2 seats in the front, but there's one more sort of design touch I do want to show you. I've got to just open the bonnet. Hang on 2 seconds. Which focuses around this very large aluminium bonnet. I mean, it is huge. There's no technical reason for wanting it, really. What Ferrari finds it does is, one, it just sort of cuts out this cut line or shut line down the middle, and two, it opens this whole thing up to a really nice view where you can see the wheel, which is meant to remind you of an opened wheel race car, but also you can see how far back this engine is. This is why they call it front mid-engine. The entire engine is behind the front axle line. You also get a view when you do this of this heavily revised aluminium structure, which I will tell you more about now before we go for a drive. The 12Cilindri has a new aluminium chassis that's stiffer but a similar weight to the 812s. Ferrari claims a dry weight of 1,560 kilos. In our experience, fueled but with lightweight options, that'll tip real-world scales at a bit over 1,700 kilos. It's 4.73 metres long, that's longer than an 812 by 73 millimetres, and it's 29 millimetres wider at 2 metres wide across the body. The wheelbase is 2.7 metres, 20 mil shorter, but if the overhangs look no bigger, that's because of 21-inch rather than 20-inch wheels. You can get Michelin Pilot Sport S5 tyres or a Goodyear Eagle F1 Supersport, the first time Goodyear has developed a bespoke tyre with Ferrari since the F50 of 30 years ago. The engine is mechanically basically the one from the 812 Competizione, a 6.5 litre naturally aspirated V12 with internals so light that it can rev to 9,500 RPM. And it makes 819 brake horsepower, so 830 metric horses, at 9,250 revs and 500 foot-pounds at 7,250 revs. The torque curve has some peaks, and we'll come to this in a bit, but in 3rd and 4th gears Ferrari has smoothed the power delivery between 2,000 and 5,000 RPM to make it more drivable. There are 8 gears in total in a rear-mounted gearbox with an electronically controlled limited slip differential and active rear steer, and there's brake-by-wire, so lots of tuning of electronic systems to be done. So welcome to the inside of this 12-cylinder marvel. It has an engine. My word, does it have an engine. Right, cockpit then first. So Ferrari say they've gone for kind of they wanted a feel where there are 2 separate but sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, symmetrical sides. So it basically runs, the passenger gets a binnacle in the same way that the driver does. Actually, for right and left-hand drive conversions, that means, you know, presumably makes their life a bit easier. But the idea is, it feels like there are 2 separate little sections, but driver and passenger both have their own little section, and I like it very much. Fit and finish is pretty good, material choice is pretty good, and you will get a choice about it. You can have like some elegant stuff, or you can have some super sporty stuff, like the carbon fibre we get in here. Get a digital instrument panel, but the speedo remains front and centre. Sorry, the rev counter remains front and centre. Speedo is off to one side. It's all digital. I wonder if, in the way that the new Bugatti has, there will be something about retaining analog instruments that will become super premium. You know, that will become the luxury version. Because every car is getting digital instruments, maybe there'll be something about going to the expense and the trouble of having analog instruments. Anyway, driving position is good, straight. Ferrari does the best paddles in the business. They stay where they are, so they were always where you left them, which I like very much. That does mean these indicators are on the steering wheel, but you know, it's very quick steering. You usually keep your hands in the same place, so actually even if they're off to one side, so when I'm over here they're not where they were, I don't do that often in this car. There is a decent boot back there. There is a decent glove box. There is oddments storage. This is a very effective interior, and I can even see the little wings on top of the bonnet either side, which help me place the car on the rack. There are sort of indented buttons on the steering wheel which control most of the driving functions, and they sort of bring up their display on the panel here. The only driving function on this central display actually is the nose lift. Other than that, it does infotainment and climate control. And the idea is that when it's off, you kind of wouldn't know it's there. It just becomes, it sort of melds into the rest of the screen. Ferrari doesn't offer its own sat-nav, and most of the entertainment is done basically through your smartphone. They figure if you're spending 300 grand on a car, you've probably got a smartphone with apps to your preference. And you've got a lot of cars, you might just want to keep the same smartphone and move from vehicle to vehicle to vehicle. That seems pretty sensible to me. So to the general driving experience, Ferrari is aware that most road driving is not exactly going to push this car's boundaries. So it says, well, this car has to be good at slow speeds, it has to be good at any speed, it has to be entertaining, it has to be rewarding. And that comes from anything through to the control weights, through to the way it rides and steers, through to the way it sounds. So let's take them bit by bit. Pedal weights are excellent. This car does get brake-by-wire, which is not the first Ferrari to do it. The idea is that the brake pedal feel is consistent all the time. Ferrari says, look, you get some cars and they've got great brake pedal feel, and then at some point you'll be into the ABS, and all of a sudden the pedal feel goes awry and it's all wrong. This doesn't do that. It's very consistent. It's very firm. As you lean on it, you get more progression back. It's really, really nicely done. Steering is quite quick. It's not heavy. It's kind of medium weighted. It's under 2 turns between locks, and this is quite a big car for that. And sometimes with V12 Ferraris in the past, you feel like you're a long way from the nose. The steering is very quick. You're near the back axle, which has got 800 horsepower, so it's quite skittish. You can sometimes feel like you're slightly hanging on to something. This way it steers at these speeds particularly doesn't feel like that so much to me. It feels more connected. The wheelbase is shorter than in the 812 by 20 millimeters, and it has this virtual long wheelbase, which is virtual short wheelbase they call it, sorry, which is also kind of almost virtual long wheelbase, because at some points it calms the car down, which is what actually a longer wheelbase would do, rather than making it more agile, which is what a short wheelbase would do. But it does both of those things. It's been tweaked, it's in a new generation, and the idea is that the agility is still there that you had from the 812. In fact, ideally the agility is enhanced almost to like 488 levels. But some of that skittishness, some of that real drama and hyperactivity has gone away. And Ferrari says, well, now we sell the SF90, which does that kind of beyond mid-engined 296 488 thing. It goes beyond that with the SF90, which lets the 12-cylinder be a rather more calm Grand Tourer, a more true Grand Tourer, because it's not having to be the fastest thing they make. That said, I mean, it is fast. It will be a bit slower than an SF90 on track, but it's much quicker than an 812. I can't really get into it on this road, but I was into it a bit earlier today because we went to Goodyear's test track, because Goodyear is a tyre partner. For the first time, Ferrari has developed a tyre with Goodyear since the F50 30 years ago. So I went to Goodyear's test track this morning for a bit of a demo and could wind the car out properly. It revs to 9.5. It is stratospherically mind-boggling. We had not very much time in it and no time to actually record a piece of camera in it, but there is some GoPro footage where it's being driven by Raffaele Di Simone, who is in charge of sort of the vehicle attributes. And I was chatting to him in the passenger seat. But we'll run a bit of that footage because it will at least let you hear the engine in a way that I can't let you hear it properly around here.
We lower the center of gravity and I have benefit overall.
How have you lowered the center of gravity?
With the new chassis, we try to put the masses as low as possible,
right,
compared to the 812. So the car is heavier, slightly heavier, but with the rear wheel steering we compensate agility.
Yeah.
And with the lower center of gravity, normally when we talk about 35 kilos, you can close that gap where placing the masses where you want. So at the end you have a benefit, and the general lightweighter car,
yeah,
playing on that.
Sounds pretty mega, doesn't it? What can I show you on the road? Well, at second gear, I think second gear will run out of speed limit pretty quick. So let's first. It's just wild. It's so fast. It's so responsive. It sounds great. Goes spectacularly. But the interesting thing about it is that Ferrari's engineers, in a bid to make it more drivable, more pleasurable on the road, they've tweaked the torque curve in third and fourth gears only, because they say, well, that's where the driver's going to be a lot of the time. Between 2,000 and 5,000 RPM, they've just tweaked the torque curve to make it more linear and progressive. It still makes peak torque where it always does. It's not like the 488, the first turbocharged mid-engined regular version, where what Ferrari did was limit the amount of torque it made in all but seventh gear to try and make it feel more progressive, I think, and also it would have been pretty wild if it had made everything all the time. This isn't there to do that. It does make its peak torque in every gear, but in just smoothing the torque curve in third and fourth, and actually on this road, which is a really nice bit of road, I get it, between 2,000 and 5,000, that is where you spend a lot of your time, and it just builds the torque progressively and pleasingly, makes a really nice noise through that rev range. You just make great progress. Really predictable, progressive, natural, smooth, but also very enjoyable progress. The ride's pretty good. It's got Magna-Ride dampers, and of course on the little Manatino there is one push of a button to take it into bumpy road mode, which lets it breathe more easily. It becomes a bit softer. It leans a reasonable amount. Actually, Jack, our photographer, has been saying actually you do notice it leaning in corners, and it does feel that it has a softness that you can lean up to, probably in a way that an 812 I don't think did. It's a friendlier car than that, and given it's got a shorter wheelbase, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be a friendlier car, but that is Ferrari's new attitude to what this car should be. It shouldn't just be a super sports car, it should also be a proper Gran Tourer. And as a result, they have tuned it more pleasingly for that to be the case. They've tweaked the way the rear steer works, they've taken advantage of the shorter wheelbase. It really does feel like everything's come together slightly. Everything is sort of foreshortened into, doesn't feel like a mid-engined car, but it feels more like a mid-engine car than the 812 did. Whereas you were front wheels felt a long way away and you were just kind of hanging on to it. This feels like everything is more compact, acting more around you. It feels like the pivot point is more here than you're sitting right at the back of the car and it's pivoting, and the nose is doing something in the distance. Here it feels like everything is kind of happening around me, and for a car of this size, of that power, I think that is a real genuine achievement. And I think this is a seriously good car. It feels like a slightly more noisy, faster Roma, or I see what Rafa means when he talks about the 488. I do get that. This feels like A Grand Tourer, but B, a more rounded, friendly sports car than it has done before. I mean, I expected to like it. I liked the 812, but this I like more, a lot more than an 812. So thanks for joining me. We're here at least every week over on the channel. You can also find us over at autocar.co.uk on the newsstands, or better still, why don't you go to the magazineshop.com/autocar and get access to the entire 129-year Autocar archive. Cheers for joining me. See you next time.